Okay, I think we will get started. Today for our statewide training, we are going to be talking about unemployment insurance. So we have Richard Prince, who is an administrator for the unemployment program that'll be presenting today. Stan, do you want to do the poll questions? Kind of didn't talk about that. Usually we start out with a couple poll questions and Stan's ready for us. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how familiar are you with the unemployment program? Okay, we're kind of about the middle. People know just a little bit, but no experts today. Well, maybe Richard. uh, and then the second question is going to pop up here. Which local workforce area do you serve? So Greater Lincoln would be Lancaster and Saunders County. Greater Omaha is your Douglas, Arby, and Washington. Greater Nebraska would be the 88 counties outside of there. Or do you work with multiple local areas, but not the state or the entire state programming? Okay, so a pretty decent mix. Looks like nobody from statewide, but a good mix throughout the different parts of the state. So I am gonna let Richard get it started from here. Richard, Stan, and I will keep an eye on the chat. There's a Q&A where you can ask questions that will come up with, or you can put a question in the chat. So they should be along the middle of the bottom of your screen. So take it away, Richard.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Really glad to see the number of folks that were able to join us after lunch. That's a challenge in of itself sometimes. Usually that's a good nap time, but hopefully the information that I share with you won't contribute to you being too sleepy. This is a Nebraska Department of Labor UI 101 training, and training is a strong word because if we were training, UI, it'd probably be, several days. But what I've done is I've tried to synthesize this down to what I think are some historically key areas, key questions, key subject matter that folks are interested in learning more about. But because I don't have the time to share everything with you, I wanted to leave a lot of time at the end for questions and answers, so that you guys can get kind of a customized or a little bit of a customized feel to whatever knowledge transfer you're interested in. So my name is Richard Prince. I'm the Unemployment Insurance Benefits Administrator here with the Nebraska Department of Labor. I've been working with the Nebraska Department of Labor since September of 2012, and I've been in this position since October of 2017. So just getting the bubble wrap off and the training wheel. So there's so much information and so much opportunities with UI that you never really feel like you've learned everything. So I'm going to try to share with you as much of my knowledge as I can today. Um, the agenda, I think some people like to see agendas. I will tell you that this will go to Jody and you'll have this PowerPoint, to look at and to review. But one of the things I wanted to do is just let you know what the roadmap is today. I do want to talk to you about the handbook for unemployed workers, or what some people call the claimant handbook. One of the frequent questions that comes up is, should a claimant file for unemployment benefits? If you get past that point, what does it look like, or what is the process of filing initial claims? You hear a lot in your circles about resume requirements, and I want to touch upon that as well. Filing weekly certifications, it's almost like the forgotten requirement within unemployment. So I want to touch upon that. Employer attachment is also a very big subject within unemployment, especially around the seasonal time of year, which is what we're coming into. And then other miscellaneous things, questions that are kind of current trending questions that we have often I want to at least share a little bit of that with you and then give you a Q&A. And so hopefully I won't go too fast. Hopefully I won't go too slow, and I'll go just right for everyone. And so let's get into it. The Handbook for Unemployed Workers is located at the link that you see here on the screen. It's one of the most underread documents that can provide you with really rich information about unemployment. All claimants are required to read this. I can't give you a percentage of how many claimants actually read it. They're required to check a box on their claim that they will read it and that they understand it's their requirement to read it. But it has a lot of really great information in here. And I just wanted to kind of show you some of the topics that are covered within the handbook so that if you have time after this presentation, give it a read. I think that you'll find a lot of what I've covered today and even some of the nuances covered in that handbook. A frequent question that is asked and that you'll be asked is, should I file for unemployment? Well, you've all probably heard the age-old talking pointer answer of, well, it depends. What I try to tell folks who are helping our customers, who are not directly UI benefit staff, is avoid trying to advise customers on this. Instead, give them the talking point to, we encourage you to file for unemployment. There are a number of customers who may be eligible for other programs out in the community or other state agencies. But one of the preconditions to be able to apply for those other services is that you must first apply for unemployment benefits and either be approved or denied. Not having that determination can delay a lot of customers from receiving or being able to access additional services and supports. And so we always tell folks, file. If you think that you're eligible when you have your last day of employment where you're physically working at your employer's place and you're not working there anymore and you've been given your separation reason, file for unemployment, and one of our adjudicators will reach out to the customer and talk to them about their claim, and they will get a determination. And so try to avoid telling people, no, you shouldn't file, you don't make enough, or no, your wages are probably another state. Let them file and let our adjudicators reach them and talk to them so that we can at least give them some type of finality in their monetary determination letter or a determination letter that tells them about their eligibility on their claims. In case some of you want to understand the technical requirements a little bit better, I've provided them here. You have to have at least 1850 in one quarter of the base period and 800 in another. The handbook talks about what constitutes a base period. And so the short, quick explanation is the current quarter that we're in right now is not part of your base period. The prior quarter that happened is called our lag period. And then the prior 4 quarters of that makes up or constitutes the base period. And a lot of that is covered in the handbook. And so that's why we always refer people to the handbook, because there's also color images in there that can help them understand a little bit better how their claim is determined by using what wages. And then finally, the 4K number also tells us, the 4891 tells us that that's how much they need to have at least in their base period to be eligible. The problem or the challenge with telling and sharing this information with you is that the risk we run is that when you convey this information to the customer, they think, okay, well then that's what it takes, so I'm not going to apply. The problem is that they may have wages in another state. They may have other things that would enable them to be eligible. And so while I share this technical information with you, it's out there on the handbook, it's out there in the public. I still would encourage you to let people know that they should file for unemployment as opposed to discouraging them from filing. So essentially, claimants' rights and responsibilities as a summary is to file. We want them to file for their claim. We want them to receive an appealable determination, and we want them to receive an appeal decision if they decide to appeal that determination. What that all means for a lot of partner organizations is that they at least have the finality and understanding of what they're eligible for, if anything. And if they're not eligible, then they can move on to other support services that may exist or may be able to be accessed in the community because they've got that determination. So we want them to report all of their employment in the last 18 months. There's a lot of claimants out there who are under the misunderstanding that they want to file on Walmart. Well, I worked for Walmart 3 months ago. That's not my current employer, but I just want to file my claim on that employer. I want to choose that. And that's never the case. That's one of the biggest issues that we find, and one of the biggest misconceptions is that a claimant can choose which employer they file their unemployment claim against. The most important thing that you could tell a customer to help us out is that they need to report all of their employment for the last 18 months, even if they work for an employer for 6 days, or if they work for their most recent employer for 2 days. They need to report all employment because that's what causes some delays. When you hear people tell you, oh, there's this delay, why is it taking so long for me to file or get an answer for my unemployment? Well, we often find out when we speak with the claimants that they've missed an employer or they have the incorrect last employer. And so because of our legal requirements, we have to give employers 10 days to respond to us. And so you can only imagine that if the 15th or 16th day that they file their claim, we find out that there's a new employer that was never mentioned or entered on their claim, that then can potentially drag out the adjudication process far longer than it needed to if they had just entered in all of the employment that they had. Claimants also will come in, they will tell you, well, I've been paying into the unemployment insurance system all my life, and these benefits are owed to me. And that simply is just not true. We talk to claimants all the time about this, and the main thing is that employers pay into the unemployment trust fund. There are no employee contributions. Now, that's not to be used as like an ace of spades or a trump card to say, ha, like you don't pay into it, so therefore, you shouldn't care. Or no, that's just making sure that the claimant doesn't assign a sense of entitlement to unemployment as opposed to needing to apply for it to be eligible for it and then to be paid out to it. It's not the same as Social Security or some other entitlement programs. Claimants also must create an active online searchable resume when they file for a claim. Now, there are waiver situations that occur, but when they first come in and enter the system, they're going to be asked to do that, or an issue will get created on their claim, and they may later be discovered to be waived or attached to an employer, which I'll explain a little bit later. But if you're dealing with the public and you're having those conversations with them, let them know, even though you may be attached to a current employer, or even if they believe that they're waived, they need to go ahead and complete that active online searchable resume, or that could impact the completion of their claim and could delay payments on their claim as well. So one of the most critical steps that is often missed in unemployment is a claimant will go through all of the trouble to file a initial claim or reopen their claim or have an additional claim filed, but then they won't file. Week after week, they won't file, even though it says and it explains in the rights and responsibilities when they file the initial claim that you are required to file weekly certifications every week. It's one of the things that is one of the most missed items that we ever have with customers. They expect that if they file the initial claim, they don't have to do anything else. And that is completely wrong. The other thing that's real risky for our customers is that we have regulations and statutes in place that say if you're not filing your claim on time and you go an entire week without filing, you get what we call a late weekly certification, which means that you may not be paid that week if you don't have just cause for missing or being late. And if you do it 2 weeks in a row, your claim closes. And so right out the gate, we continue to talk to customers and say, have you filed your weekly certification? You have until Saturday, 11:59 p.m. of the week following the week you're trying to get paid. So if I'm trying to get paid for last week, I need to file my weekly certification this week by Saturday, 11:59 p.m. It's also part of the rights and responsibilities checkbox that they have to check when they're filing their initial claim. And so it's really hard to win an appeal if they say, well, I just forgot to file. Now, one quick clarification, they don't permanently lose that week. It's still in their account. They just don't get paid for that week. So it extends out the life of their claim. It just doesn't mean that they won't get paid that week. They don't lose the money. And then I at least wanted to touch upon the fact that the WBA is another question that we often get asked, the weekly benefit amount. The max this year is $514. And there'll be an updated claimant handbook coming out soon. That number will increase for 2024. I just don't have that number to share with you today. So again, they have to maintain an online searchable resume, but they also can't take it offline. So if they go through the trouble, and we've had this happen repeatedly, to create a searchable resume, for whatever reason, they go in and they take it and they put it offline. They have to have it online and set to online. If they don't have it set to online, then until we've determined whether or not they are waived for that, they would be disqualified for any weeks that they are claiming for. And so that's why we always encourage and we try to communicate to all of our customers that you have to have an online searchable resume to cover that requirement. I put in the quotes, the exemption for attached claimants and claimants that do not live in bordering states or counties. I give that information to you, not as a talking point necessary to share with the customer, but just for your own general awareness. Those are exemptions that we apply once we get the claim and once we start adjudicating the claim. But it's not something that I would necessarily expect you to share with your customers, but it's something that I want you to be aware of, that if somebody is filing a claim in Nebraska and they actually live in Florida and they're filing a combined wage claim, or they live in New Mexico, they're not required to have an active online searchable resume. But that only is determined after we've adjudicated the claim, we've determined where they live, and all those things have happened. Another important thing is that claimants often make the mistake and they report their earnings the week they were paid. So I work this week, but I don't get paid for these wages until 2 weeks, so I'm just not going to report that. Unemployment is different. Unemployment requires any earnings to be reported the week in which they were earned. And so oftentimes, if customers misunderstand that, or we give incorrect advice, it could lead into an overpayment. And we want to avoid that at all costs. And so that's why we tell our customers that, hey, they'll ask us, hey, I was working 2 days this week. Will I be eligible for a weekly benefit? And we say, we don't know. Report your earnings for this week, and then the system will do its calculation and will alert you as to whether or not you're eligible for a partial or full benefit or no benefit at all. But at all times, report your earnings when they were earned. And then also, if they get a new job, there are questions on the weekly certification that ask the customer, are you working new employment? And again, they make that same analysis. Well, I started a job this week, but I'm not going to get paid for it for a couple of weeks, so I'm just not going to claim it. And I need the unemployment to tide me over until I can, get my first full paycheck. It doesn't work that way. If they start working at a job this week, let's say Monday, and they're earning wages this week, all of those earnings must be reported on their weekly cert for the benefit for this week. And that's one of those things that a lot of our customers get wrong, and they end up having an overpayment. It's one of those things that we want to make sure we communicate to you, so that if you are working with any of our UI benefits customers, then you can explain to them, hey, make sure you're reporting your earnings when you earn them. Don't wait until you get paid. That's going to create potentially an overpayment on your claim. At this time of year, one of the biggest topics that we have discussed with employers and claimants is employer attachment. So there's a lot of information on this screen, and you can read it yourselves. But the biggest takeaway I want you guys to have is that employer attachment belongs to the employer. It does not belong to the claimant. And what I mean by that is, is that the employer is the one who communicates to us that this particular employee is attached to their company for 112 days or less. A claimant, when they're filing their claim, should be in communication with their employer, and they should be reporting on their initial claim that they are employer attached. They do expect to be recalled, and when that recall date is. Oftentimes, this doesn't happen. A claimant files their claim, they say that they're terminated, they say that they don't have a recall date, and then they are profiled in our AnyRes algorithm, and they're also required to do work searches, and they don't understand why. And so it's really important that if you are communicating with our customers and our claimants and they're like confused about, well, what should I do? You should always indicate on your initial claim whether or not your employer has told you they are going to recall you. And if they did tell you they're going to recall you, then the employer is required to give an exact date. It can't be this spring. It can't be someday. It can't be in 4 weeks. It has to be January X of 2024. Otherwise, the individual will be unattached. They will be required to be seated for AnyRes, and they will do work search activities. And so when you start hearing the scuttlebutt about, well, I don't understand why I'm this, and I don't understand why I have these questions, and I don't understand, a lot of it originates from the fact that claimants need to indicate on their initial claims that they are expected to be recalled, yes, and that the expected return to work date is a specific date that has to be within 112 days of their last physical day that they worked. Otherwise, our system will automatically unattach them. It will not attach them up to 112 days. If you break that rule of 112 days or less, it automatically unattaches you and you're seated for AnyRes and you have to do work search activities and things of that nature. There are exceptions. One of the exceptions is those individuals who are part of a union. The caveat to that is that they need a letter from their union that says they're in good standing. There are a number of people that say, well, I've been a member of local 200, but haven't paid their dues. They haven't paid their dues in years, and they don't get work from the union because they haven't paid their dues. And so if they're not in good standing and they have not had their dues paid up, then we won't have a letter on their account that says from the union that they're in good standing. And so therefore they won't be attached. And so some people will say, well, I just tell them that I'm, attached to a union, or I'm telling them what I'm part of local machinist 513. That doesn't work. That we have to have a letter from the union indicating that that individual is dues are paid up, they're in good standing, and they're receiving work from the union, work referrals from the union, and then they're exempt. So again, additional background information. You guys can read all of this on your own. There are exceptions and waivers if you're part of an approved training program or trade. But I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time going in that because I think this is something that you'll be able to read on your own. And if you have follow-up questions, we can go into it even further. I did want to let you know that on our website, the link that you see here is the guidance document that talks about individuals who are attached to a regular job or union or industry. It's the guidance as to attachment. In this guidance is also information that I personally share with employers, and I do a lot of employer talks and I do WebExes, but inside this document, it also tells an employer how to extend their 112 days by recalling their employees back for 2 consecutive weeks and paying them at their regular rate. And so because of this, what we have found is we've had a number of employers over the years bring their people back in December or January, have them do shop cleanup or have them do training, things that they would have normally scheduled not in the seasonal period. They delay it now to the seasonal period, pay them for the 2 weeks, and then they essentially get 112 additional days because they've returned to work and they've been paid for 2 weeks at their regular salary. And so by the statute, by the guidance document, their attachment period is extended for an additional 16 weeks. And we continue to have the conversation with a number of employers who don't take advantage of that. And we let them know that the request for extensions that they hear about that are 2 weeks at the end of the 112 days, those go through legal and those are not often approved because there has to be, 12 feet of snow outside, or there has to be some act of God that's going on that's preventing you from working outside or continuing your work. It's very difficult to get those extensions. And so I just blew it up a little bit bigger to let you see where the link was. And then here are the specific bullet points for the 112. 16 weeks is one of the longest in the entire country. The recall date and expected return to work date, it has to be an actual physical date. It can't be a rate. What I also tell employers is if you don't know when you're going to bring them back, then Google the last day that they work in 112 days out and use that date, because otherwise then we will not attach your employee to your company, and therefore they'll be seated for any res and they'll be required to do work search activities, and 9 times out of 10 the employer will then adjust that and then we'll get them taken care of. Another issue that has come up recently is the recall, and I'm going to handle it in 2 parts. So this is the exception I was telling you about, where if they recall them for 2 weeks, they can extend their attachment period for an additional 112 days. But recall also is in relationship to when a employer recalls the employee and they don't come back. They're not reachable. So because the attachment belongs to the employer, if they recall their employee and the employee does not return and the employer reports that to us, we investigate the issue and it potentially could lead to what we call a 12 and 12 disqualification. 12 weeks of benefits reduced by WBA 12 times, and 12 weeks ineligible for receiving benefits. Because an employer needs to be able to say in January, I need you to come back. We have this special order. I need you to come back to work. If the employee does not show up on that recall, then there are other things the employer can do, like terminating the employee. But from an unemployment standpoint, that can trigger a very significant penalty. I just wanted to add a couple of miscellaneous things in here. Some questions or issues that have kind of come up that are kind of high points for us. Direct deposit versus debit card. Some people think that our claim specialists, when they call them at the 458 number, they can update direct deposit information, and they can't. Staff are not able to do that. And so if you have a customer who's saying, well, I can't get paid benefits, have them change their payment to debit card, get the payments on the debit card going, and then have them then try to go in and select direct deposit at that point. The key is that we need to get them their benefits paid to them. And if they have fat fingered a number in their account, our system is going to tell them. Our system is going to send them a notice that says your banking ACH account is either invalid or it rejected sending payment to what you entered on your account. A claim specialist cannot fix that. If they go into an AJC for direct services, an AJC staff member cannot fix that. That's something that they will have to select debit card, change their banking information after a week to see if it takes at that point. If it doesn't, then what they can do is they can go into an AJC, let the person know that they've tried that, and then they can escalate that up to a UI benefits supervisor or myself to address. The other thing is that assistance for claimants when filing for their unemployment claim, they can call the 458-2500 number, but you've probably heard already, long wait times, it's hard to get through. We recommend that folks do it in person at their AJCs because there's a direct ring down phone that takes priority over outside calls. And so some people don't know that. If I go into an AJC and I seek assistance, there are two things that are going to happen. We have direct services staff that are there that can help people navigate towards filing their claim, their weekly certs, their resume, and even doing job searches. The other thing that will happen is that if their problem is so unique that it can't be handled in the room, then they have a direct services ring down phone that puts them priority in queue so that there could be 10 people that are calling from outside of the AJC. When the person picks up the AJC phone, it becomes a priority call. And that's how the system is set up. And so that's why we encourage folks to go into the AJCs to do that. The other reason we encourage them to go in to the AJCs because they can get a lot more assistance than just filing their UI claim or weekly certifications or work searches. There are other partner organizations that are located within the AJC. There are other reemployment service coordinators that are in the AJCs that can help them to seek employment, help them with interview skills. There's just a number of other opportunities there. I used to work in like the reemployment services arena, and my customers at that time primarily were UI customers. And so there was this perfect marriage of, coming in, getting your UI set up, and then letting me help you to try to get employment and be that facilitator for you. And so that's why we like it when people go into the AJCs because it opens up a number of additional possibilities for the customer to receive additional services and supports. So I think that is it. Now we're ready for Q&A. 30 minutes, not too bad. So Jody, do you want to facilitate that or how?
Yeah. Yeah. There's the first one's just asking for a copy of your PowerPoint. So we can send that out when we send the recording. The second one is 11:59 p.m. Central Time, or I'm guessing for the end of to file weekly claims. I think that was back.
Yeah, so if somebody is in like Scotts Bluff, um, and they file at 11:59 their time and they get a late weekly cert, we will address that and count it as on time because it shouldn't. The system shouldn't count that as late because they filed, I'm going to probably get it wrong, but they filed in their time 11 o'clock. And then on Central Time, it's already past midnight or something. So hopefully that answers that question.
Okay. This one says, in Sydney, my UI phone has people calling it. Is this normal?
So I'm not for sure if that's a situation where um, someone has received assistance by calling that phone. And so now word has gotten out that if you need assistance, don't call the 2500 number, call, Melissa. She's gonna help you out with your UI claim and bypass everything else. But the talking point that we have for anyone who is direct dialed is to let them know that they can call the 458 number, or they can go into a local AJC to receive direct services. But I would not help someone with a UI question who direct called you and you're not in that capacity to assist them. If you do, what ends up happening is that they will continue to call and information will just trickle out into the world that this is where you go to bypass and not wait in line.
So this is the Sydney staff person for NDOL, and it sounds like her UI phone actually rings and people call her on it. It just says it's like a random kid or people asking for other people not UI related. And I don't think those UI phones are supposed to ring, are they? I believe not.
No, no. If you're talking about the direct ring down phone, no one is supposed to have that number. So send me, and I'll at the end of this, I'll have my information and it'll be on the PowerPoint. Send me an email and let me know like date and time because we have the ability to kind of track that through OCIO to see what maybe be happening. But if you're talking about your direct ring down phone, then that should not be happening. That should only ring out to the claim center. Sorry if I
Yeah.
misunderstood that question.
Yeah, that's weird. Okay, next one. The handbook says you may be eligible for up to 26 weeks of benefits a year. If a claimant receives a deductible income notice stating that their severance or vacation pay is disqualifying earnings for the week to which they apply, do those weeks that is deductible income applied to count as taking up the 26 weeks for that claim year? Are those weeks in addition to the 26 weeks?
No, so what that essentially means is that they just aren't eligible to start receiving their regular unemployment 20 up to 26 weeks. It just delays it. It doesn't mean they lose it. The only situation where they potentially could be considered losing it is if they get a really generous severance that pays them for 10 months or something, then it's really hard to receive weeks for your claim when your severance will go out that far. You'll only have 12 or 13 weeks of eligibility before your claim actually ends and expires. So you receiving severance or vacation that pushes that out, you don't lose those weeks. You just aren't eligible to claim those weeks until that runs out. And in the very rare instance where the person has received a severance that could put them in a situation where they can't get their full 26 weeks, then that's one of those probably 1 or 2% scenarios that happens. What we find is oftentimes people will have a severance that is, between anywhere from 3 to 6 months, and sometimes it's longer. But for the most part, that's what happens. And then they start claiming unemployment benefits at that time at whatever their WBA, and they can still claim for up to 26 weeks or until their benefit year ends. And then they would have to file a new claim, have a new waiting week, and then could potentially be eligible for 26 more weeks. We hope, obviously, that folks within that severance period find other employment, avail themselves of the AJC resources, come in and try to find employment so that they don't have to get into a situation where they run out of their severance and they have to start using their unemployment and they run out of their unemployment. By then, we'll also profile them likely for any res, and they'll be connected with a reemployment services worker to help them to find a job quicker. If that makes sense. Hopefully that answered that question.